going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I've been posting a lot more recently because I've had a lot more ideas here and there. And sorry if my tripod's a little shaky. Currently having to do a really odd thing to prop it up. One of my legs have gotten stuck on it, so I'm gonna have to like oil that up or something. But here's my top 5 budget decks that you could put together, and some of them you could per se, yes, play at a more competitive standpoint. So, you know, we'll go through that, and if I can get my editing down a little bit more, I've been practicing editing videos and stuff. If I can get it down some more on this video, I'll have pictures pop up of like other cards that are involved in the deck and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and talk about my number 1 budget deck pick, which would be Gazelle, aka Solomon Great. So Gazelle basically makes the deck good, which is why I said Gazelle. But Solomon Great is one of those really good budget decks that you can play at a competitive standpoint. It does have good matchups. I think it has like a 50% win rate on Dueling Book right now, or whatever it is. It's like it's a good deck. Like you have chances of winning in higher up tournaments and stuff like that with this deck. You could probably snag a top spot maybe. There's a lot of people are playing a lot of different builds now, which is kind of interesting as well, but the deck is a very solid choice in my opinion. This deck is not really that expensive. The most expensive cards you have to buy for it are basically Access Code Talker, and that's pretty much it. Because if you're playing, let's say if you were going to play Ash, if you were able to find the 3 Soul Burner structure decks, you could pick up 3 of those, pretty much have the whole deck, and you'd have all 3 Ash Blossoms you would need for $30. So at that point, all you need to buy is like Sunlight Wolf, Access Code, if you're going to build a more expensive version. If not, you'd pick up Sunlight Wolf, Update, Transcode, and like a Boral Sword Dragon. Otherwise, you'd be picking up Update, Transcode, Access Code Talker if you're wanting to build the more expensive version. But this is about the budget version of the deck, so for instance, you will just be picking up probably Transcode and Update, and then if you want some more OTK potential, you'd also pick up a Boral Sword Dragon, which is still a very good OTK card. It's just been put in the dark because of Access Code Talker. But it's still a very good OTK card, which is why Salad is pretty much fine where it is, because you can OTK with just Transcode and Update. So the deck's fine without Access. Access does make it more easy to OTK, but without it you can still play very easily. And the only other really expensive card, like I said, was Ash, which I think the commons sit like what, $16, $17 or something like that. They're still pretty high up there for a common, but like I said, if you can find the structure deck, $30, boom, there you go, you got most of the deck. So that's my number 1 pick. My number 2 pick would be probably Falafels, and this is more or less like one of those niche kind of strategies. Basically, your whole strategy behind this deck is you're going to get some big fusions out, and it can OTK real easy as well. It's a really easy deck to OTK with. It's got cards like Fright for Sabretooth, which gets higher up in attack with more Fright Furs, and I think Falafels on the field as well. So he just gets bigger and bigger, and he can bring other Fright Fur cards back from the grave to the field, which then he boosts them and himself. If you use 3 or more materials, he's I believe unaffected by battle and card effects, so he becomes practically a walking OTK because it's so hard to get around. And Falafels on like at a bigger standpoint, it's stuffed animals, so why wouldn't you play it? It's like the manliest deck you can play. So I mean, why not go out there and show how manly you are by playing some stuffed animals? And also, this deck looks pretty good. The rarities for it, I think, cap out at super for the main deck. As for the most expensive card in Fright Fur, or as I should say Falafel, I think it's probably going to be your Fright Fur Kraken. That card's probably going to sit the highest, but you only need to play 1 to 2 copies. So it still makes it a very viable budget deck. You can make it more expensive by running Predaplant, Verte Anaconda, but you don't have to play it, so you can play other stuff. So the deck is very flexible to be cheap. You can fit a lot of hand traps in this as well. Maybe not like Ash and stuff if you're building a more budget variant, but you could fit in like Veilers and what's another cheap one? Bell isn't that expensive right now. Crow isn't that expensive. Draw's gone down a little bit, but I don't think it's like at that cheap point, but it's still cheap enough where you could probably pick up one or two. Gammas aren't that expensive. You could fit Gamma and Driver in here. There's just a lot you could do to fit in this deck to make it even more competitive. You can probably take this deck to some competitive tournaments and stuff and probably come out pretty well, because a lot of people don't actually know what this deck does and what it's capable of. So that's why it's my number 2 spot. My number 3 spot has to go to probably one of my favorite decks of all time, and that's Cyber Dragon. I love Cyber Dragon. Such a fun deck. Such a cool deck. It's just so resilient as well. A lot of people do make the argument that if you can't play Dragoon, it's kind of not worth playing, but at the end of the day, it's still a very, very scary deck to go against. The OTK potential with this deck is insane. The stuff you can do with this deck is also really insane. You can contact fuse away your opponent's monsters and stuff, and it's just really strong. You've got like 2 or 3 extenders in there. You've got your core, Cyber Dragon Core, which is like your main searcher. He can pretty much search any of your spells or traps to your hand, which is insane. Everything's considered a Cyber Dragon whenever it's on the field, practically. So it's kind of funny in that sense. You got your really good XYZ Cyber Dragon Infinity, which is just able to negate anything, which is also really good. So if you end up going first, at least you can set up some kind of, first turn plays. But this is one of those decks to where I don't know if you could take it to a more competitive standpoint and come out on top. Maybe if you played some more control type Cyber Dragon rather than OTK, because if you're not able to fit that Anaconda in there, playing a more OTK variant is a little bit more risky. Not to say that it's not bad, but it is just really risky. Cyber Dragon, you can build it pretty cheap, honestly. If you just pick up all the lowest rarities and stuff, you could probably pick up the deck for a really nice price. I think the most expensive card would have been Dragoon if you're playing the expensive version, but if you're playing budget, I think your most expensive card is probably gonna be Galaxy Soldier. Galaxy Soldier is a pretty expensive card, but again, that's one of those cards that you only need to play 2 of. So it's perfectly fine. The deck's super good, super cheap, and just a really fun deck all around, which is why I give it my number 3 spot. My number 4 spot is a deck that I have a love-hate relationship with, and it is Burning Abyss. You could take this in consideration of like PK Burning Abyss or just regular Burning Abyss. For this instance, I'm gonna just talk about regular Burning Abyss, because PK makes it even more expensive. Regular Burning Abyss, it's budget, but it's not like super budget, just because Graphs and Seers are sitting pretty high right now. Well, the rares aren't sitting that high, but the gold rares are sitting pretty high. So if you just pick up the lowest rarity of this deck, you can still pick it up at a very budget price. I think your most expensive card is probably going to be Cherubini. That's probably going to be your most expensive card. And this deck is just really fun, really good. It can OTK, but you have to play some like pretty weird cards. You can probably get away with playing Boral Sword in this deck, which is a really good budget OTK card, like I was talking about for Solomon Great. With Cherubini being a thing in this deck now, you can pretty much play just about any OTK that you might want that is able to be made in this deck. It is a very RNG based deck, I will say that. It does really depend on the mills if you get good openings or good starts or anything like that, but it is a super fun deck, and I do highly advise at least trying to play it, because it's a super fun deck, super cheap, and you can maybe take it to some competitive play. I wouldn't really want to unless it's like a locals, because I'm not really sure if this can really, well, pure Burning Abyss, I'm not really sure if it can compete at those higher levels. Not to mention you can play a more control variant of Burning Abyss. So, as for my final deck that I have on the list, my number 5 pick, and pretty self-explanatory, being Monarchs. Monarchs is a super cheap, like, the most expensive card in Monarchs is probably Pantheism, and it's not even that expensive. So Domain Monarchs, super easy to get your hands on, and a really good beginner deck. So if you have a friend that's like, I want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh!, they could pick up Monarchs. Like, Monarchs isn't going to cost them an arm and a leg. It does what it does. It is known as a brick, but there are some support cards out there for it. And you could just play them without the support cards. You could play just other stuff. You could play Mithras and stuff like that, and red layers and all that. But the whole sole purpose of this deck, if you don't know, is to get out your Domain your Domain field spell with any kind of tribute summoned Monarch, so you can lock your opponent out of the extra deck and pretty much control the game from there, and eventually build up enough monsters to just swing for game. There's a lot of different ways you could play this deck. You could play it with some really big, strong monsters, or you could play it with just your regular Monarchs that probably sit at like 2800 attack. You can play an extra deck variant, which I haven't really seen around recently, and I'm not too sure how much that would cost you. You could play with the new support that just came out, but I haven't price checked it yet, so I'm not too sure on how expensive the new support is. Only time will tell. And the Domain Monarch is just probably my favorite way to play it. And just playing it, I guess, quote-unquote pure is also one of my favorite ways to play it. While, yes, the new support can make it better, you don't have to play it like I said. You can easily just pick up the 3 structure decks if you can find them for $10. They probably sit at more now after all this time, and if they do, that's fine. You could pick up all the cards. You could probably pick up the whole deck for, I don't know, maybe $80. It's not that expensive, maybe not even 80. It might even be cheaper than that. This is just one of those decks that I think everyone should at least have built at least once, or have pretty much all the cards for in their binder or something, just because it's so cheap and just kind of really a really niche deck that's fun to pick up and play. But yeah, that is pretty much my 5 picks of budget decks. Now you could take and move these in any kind of way you want. You can say one's better than the other, it doesn't really matter. But here are my top 5 picks. Let me know down in the comments your top 5 picks, and I guess I'll just see you guys in the next one. Like I always say, like, comment, subscribe. I'll just see you in the next one.